So let's talk about something really strange that's happening in the housing market. On one hand, we keep hearing the job market is strong, but on the other, the new home market feels like it's stuck in ice. It just doesn't add up. So today, we're going to crack this puzzle and figure out what's really going on.
I mean, this is the big question, isn't it? High employment should mean people have money, and when people have money, they buy houses. It should be booming. But that's just not what's happening. The reality is, well, it's way more complicated. And it turns out we've been looking at the wrong numbers.
I saw one analysis that put it, well, pretty dramatically. But this quote right here, it gets straight to the point. This isn't a problem with the job market in general. Oh no. It's a problem with a very, very specific kind of job and the very specific buyer who has it.
To really get what's happening, you need to understand this one big idea. We're going to call it the buyer gate. Think of it as this massive wall, the single biggest barrier standing between someone who wants to buy a house and actually getting the keys.
Okay, so what does this gate even look like? Well, first up, there's the price of admission. The median price for a brand new home is sitting just shy of $400,000. That's a pretty hefty sum for just about anyone. But here's the kicker. This is the real gatekeeper. It's not just the price of the house. To even get a loan for that house, you need to be making at least, and I mean at least, 120 grand a year. And that, right there, is the crucial piece of the puzzle. So you see, it's this 1-2 punch, the high price tag plus the high interest rates that creates what we're calling the qualification bar. And that is our gate. It's totally changed the game. It's no longer about whether you want to buy a home. It's about whether you have the cold, hard cash flow to get past these financial gatekeepers.
So how on earth do we get here? Well, the story really unfolds like a perfect 3-act play. Act 1 is how this big pool of qualified buyers was created in the first place. And Acts 2 and 3 are about how that pool got, well, completely drained.
Here's our roadmap for the story. We start with Act 1, the engine, where the buyer pool was getting bigger and bigger. Then Act 2, the gate rises, which is when everything changed. And finally, Act 3, the engine stalls, which brings us right to where we are today. Let's start at the beginning. So rewind to the years between 2019 and 2022. Man, the economic engine was just on fire. You had these really high-paying sectors, think tech, finance, that kind of thing. They added a mind-blowing 1.8 million jobs. This created this huge, deep pool of people who were perfectly qualified to buy a new home. And then Act 2 begins. And boy, did things change fast. Just look at this. Mortgage rates more than doubled, jumping from around 3% to 7%. And because of that, the income you needed to pass that gate skyrocketed from a manageable $75,000 to that $120,000 plus we just talked about. And that massive jump in the income you needed, it had this immediate, really dramatic effect. Suddenly, entire professions, we're talking about tons of people in healthcare, for example, who could have bought a home just a year or two before, were completely locked out. The market suddenly became dependent on a very small, very elite group of high earners. And that leads us to the big, dramatic climax, Act 3. Right when the market needed those high-earning buyers the most, bam, this happens. A net loss of more than 220,000 jobs in the exact sectors that could still afford to buy a new house. Unbelievable. You gotta understand, this is a huge turning point. For the first time in 5 whole years, the only group of people who can actually pass that qualification bar is getting smaller. The engine that was powering this whole market didn't just stall, it's actually going in reverse. So you put all those pieces together, the engine starting, the gate rising, the engine stalling, and what do you get? You get our final verdict. This is not your typical housing downturn. It's not a general jobs crisis. It's a crisis of the qualified buyer. This chart right here just lays out the core problem perfectly. On the left, you see the red bar. Those are the high-wage jobs, the ones that can afford new homes, and they are disappearing. On the right, you see jobs are being added in other sectors like healthcare. But, and this is a huge but, there's a major problem. And if that chart didn't make it clear enough, this table will. Just look at that top row. The average person in a growing field like healthcare makes about $87,000. But remember, the income needed to buy is over 120 grand. That's a $33,000 gap. They just don't make enough money to fill the void left behind. And all of this brings us right to the main idea, the big takeaway from this whole thing.
We are living in a specific buyer recession. It's a downturn that's not caused by a lack of jobs in general, but by a shrinking pool of people who have the specific income they need to buy a really expensive product, like a brand new home.
You can almost think of it as an income inversion. It's this bizarre situation where home builders are working their tails off, building houses for a customer who is literally disappearing from the economy. They can make the houses smaller, they can cut some costs here and there, but none of that fixes the fundamental problem. Their customer base is contracting. And that, of course, leaves us with one pretty unsettling question, right? If the entire new home industry is building a product for a buyer who is actively vanishing, what in the world happens next? Something has to give.